Okay guys, in today's tutorial we'll be looking at malware. By the way, the term malware stands for malicious software, and so we are going to be looking at different kinds of malware, the malware threats. Malware is one of the deadliest way to break into a secure network today, and we're looking at different kinds of malware, and we'll go ahead in this tutorial to do a demo on how we can create a malware. We're just going to come up with a basic malware, but is basic enough to be able to hack into a Windows 10 PC. Alright, so as I mentioned, malware stands for malicious software, and by definition is any kind of software that is designed to undermine the security of a system. Okay, so security of a PC, a laptop, a server, routers, switches, firewalls, etc. And so once this software is the aim is to undermine or weaken the security of a system, that's what a malicious software is, aka malware. Many different types of malware, as we're going to see in the next slide. And so these many different types of malware have different objectives, and they also have specific characteristics that they do exhibit depending on the intention of who created the malware. But then, in general terms, malware normally have a way of propagating. That is the way they spread from system to system. And also, the major common thing among them is that they always deliver a payload, which is the action, the actual action, the intent of the person that created the malware and what he wants the malware to do. Alright, so that's just a brief description of what a malware is. Malicious software, any form of software designed to weaken the security of a system. Now let's look at different types of malware. By no means we are not going to exhaust all the different types of malware that we have, but let's look at virus. This is probably the most popular of the malware. Malicious code that requires some user action to propagate. Yeah, this is still a malicious software. It requires a user to move a file that is infected from one place to the other. And that's why it says it requires some user action to propagate. So malware cannot move itself from a computer to another computer without user interference. And so this is designed to deliver a payload. So depending on what the intent once again is, or the person that crafted the virus. Different variants of virus, stealth virus, polymorphic, and encrypted, which is the most deadly type of virus. Next up is worms. So worms is similar to virus, but the difference between worm and virus is that worms do not need user action to propagate. They can actually spread on their own. Worms can actually move through the local area network from one system that is vulnerable on the network to another system that is also vulnerable. And so your system could be vulnerable to worm or to virus if you don't have any antivirus or anti-spyware software installed on your system. I don't want to mention any vendor here, but then you shouldn't leave your system exposed without having some sort of defense in terms of antivirus solutions running somewhere in your system. Alright, so example of worm, RTM worm that took down the internet in 1988, and a couple of other worms have come out today, WannaCry, etc. But then worm can move through a wireless network, can also move through a local area network LAN, and move from one system through the network cable to another system. That makes it much more severe and much more deadly compared to virus. Next up is Trojan Horses. It's designed to trick a user into installing it, and then when it gets into your system, it masquerades as another application. For instance, you get a free app, maybe MP4 player, and this free app has a malicious code embedded into it. So you downloaded this app to use it to play videos. Yeah, it's going to perform as advertised because it's going to be giving you some functions of MP4 player, but again it goes ahead to deliver a malicious payload, and that payload is actually what is going to execute, carry out the ideas of the person that developed that Trojan. And that's what Trojan horses are. And logic bombs is the nest designed to lay in wait and deliver their payload. When logical conditions are met, certain criteria could be specified in a logic bomb that will define what they mean by logical conditions. It could be date, a particular date of the month, particular time of the day, stock price, removal of a user account from a system, etc., etc. But the point is that you can actually create a malware and then you try to tell the malware when it should act. It shouldn't act immediately it gets into a system. It should wait for logical conditions. When the conditions are good, it should go ahead and strike. That's logic bomb. Backdoors, yeah. So backdoors could be a security bypass. It could be created without any malicious intent. But then backdoors could also be created with a malicious intent. Okay, so software developers could create a bypass, a backdoor as it's called. For instance, you know that top companies have a way of allowing law enforcement agents to have access to the back end of their resources in order to probably they're carrying out investigation, so they need some info and all that. And that is a good aspect of backdoors. But then backdoors could also be a malicious software that is created by attackers, and it allows them to gain unauthorized access into a computer system. Okay, so backdoors could be deadly if they get into our system. Next up is botnets. So it's basically a collection of systems that are controlled by a botnet master, usually amassed through other forms of malicious code, especially systems that have been compromised, systems that have downloaded articles or files that contain malware. All right, so it's kind of like a flavor, another form of distributed denial of service attack, DDoS attack. All right, so when the botnet attack comes, you obviously gonna have thousands of systems attacking at the same time. And then next up is spyware. Well, spyware, just as name is spyware. All right, so just as you can have an individual, a human being spying on you, you could also have someone spying on you without actually following you, without even being close to you. So you could create a malicious software, a malicious code that is designed to monitor your user activities on the keyboard, report back to the source. So have to be careful, especially when you are using some free software you downloaded from the internet, that you cannot really verify the integrity of the source of such software, because if a spyware gets into your system, it's gonna scan your systems looking for some information like passwords, usernames, social security numbers, credit card information, debit card information, etc. All right, so have to install anti-spyware software in our systems to help us block these malicious activities. Okay, so this is kind of like a summary of different types of malware that we have, and now it's time for us to jump in and see how we can create a malware. This is for educational purposes. We want to see how these things are created and how deadly they can be if they get into our systems. So the idea is to help us see how better to secure our systems and protect our system from malicious codes, malware. All right, so I'll be using Kali Linux in this demo. So I'm powering up, my Kali is already up. I'm using Kali 2021.4, and in this case, going to open terminal. I'll see your terminal at the top left hand side if you are using same Kali that I use. All right, so I logged into this machine as root. Okay, so what are the codes, what are the commands that we need to quickly create a malware in this machine? So already have it here opened up, and we're going to use a tool called MSF Venom. MSF Venom is a tool that we actually is not the only tool, but one of the tools that we could use to create a malware. The -p here is payload. So the payload we are using is Windows payload, metapreter reverse _TCP. The platform is 32 bits operating for 32 bits operating system, and then that's actually the architecture. So the platform is Windows. Now we need to specify the format of the malware. All right, so you could create a malware and make it .pdf, .excel, .doc, whatever format. In this case, -f here meaning format means that I'm using exe, which means I want this malware to look like an executable. All right, so don't forget rather don't forget what I've explained so far. Just for clarity, MSF Venom is a tool. -p is what? Payload. We're using Windows payload, Metapreter reverse _TCP. So the victim system will be the one making a connection to the attacker's machine. And that's what a reverse connection is. Then architecture -a is going to be for 32 bits. And then platform is going to be Windows. And then format is going to be executable. And so if you go ahead here, you are going to see the target. So when the malware we create gets into a person's PC, the person's PC is going to be making a connection to our Kali, which is a reverse connection. And so the person's PC needs to know what our Kali IP address is. So as a matter of fact, to get your Kali IP address, just go to terminal and do ifconfig. Know that in Windows you use ipconfig. So ifconfig, hit the enter key. You could see my Kali IP is 10.0.2.9. And so if that is gotten, I've already inputted it here. And so I have to create a port number on the Kali that the Kali will be listening on to see whether the victim that has the malware on his system is making a connection back to us. So I'm using L port, which is local ports, and then L host is local host, which is the IP of your Kali, the attacker machine. L port, any port number of your choice. Could use 443 or port 80, but here I'm going for 4444. And lastly, we have -o here, which means output. So when we have created this malware on the Kali machine, where do we want this malware to be stored? Inside our Kali, I want it to be in the root folder, in the root directory. So I want it to be in the root, and I want to name the malware something 32. And here we've already specified that we want it to be an executable file. So after naming the malware, don't forget to put that extension. All right, and that actually is a command we use to create a basic malware, just to have a feel of how a malware is created. And I'm going to copy all of this, Ctrl+C, and come to let me first off clear the screen. Spelling. Clear the screen, and then right click, paste selection. All right, bam, hit enter key. And so we should quickly create our malware. All things being equal, just give it a couple of seconds, like 30-45 seconds. The malware should be created depending on the speed of your Kali machine. All right, so wait for the malware to finish creating, and once that is done, we are going to navigate to the output folder. You know that we said that the malware should be placed in a location called what? Root. And so the name of the malware should be what? Something 32.exe. And so the malware is done being created, and you can see the size is 73,802 bytes. And so let's go ahead and navigate to, I think I'm already at the root, pwd. So I'm already at my root directory, which is where I want the malware to be created. So I could do list ls, and you see here my malware is sitting down here. So something 32.exe, and I could also look up this malware on the GUI. So if I come to desktop, I'm going to open file system, and you can see my roots, and inside my roots we look for, what's the name, something32.exe, and that's it here. So this actually is the malware. So I'm going to right click on this malware. I'm going to copy it. You can actually move it to you can move it into your flash, but be careful that you don't have important document in that flash. Alright, so something32.exe. Alright, so that is the creation of malware. But you can actually go online. This my machine is not on the internet presently, but if I do connect it to the internet, we can actually go online, upload this malware that we have created to some websites online, and we are going to see which of the antivirus solutions is able to detect that this is a malware. But that's how to create a malware. Thank you so very much for joining in, and I hope you do the same in your own lab environment.